fans, Ryan Aho and the one and only Bert Lehman bringing you episode number 102 for the One to Go show. So, Bert, how the heck was your week, man?
Good. Today I just finished mowing lawn. I'm hoping that it's the last time for the year. I wanted to get that done today because today could be the last day in the 70s for the year, according to the weatherman this morning, because it's supposed to drop into highs of 50s around here starting tomorrow.
Bert, I got to be honest. I don't like your attitude. We're just going to have a discussion about this. I'm going to send you to the principal office. I'm hoping we have like a whole lot more days in the 70s, right? I'm hoping. And if we don't at home, we can always go south, right? We got all them races down south. We should have a lot more days in the 70s. And I don't want to hear anybody ever say, I hope it's the last time I got to mow lawn, because that means that you have to shovel snow. And mowing lawn is better than shoveling snow. You can race in the summer, not so much in the winter. So I don't know how I feel about that.
They race in the winter around here as long as it's got to get cold enough for the lakes to freeze. But there's actually a strong contingent of racers in this area that race on frozen lakes and frozen ponds in the winter.
Okay, there's a little bit of that up north. I know they were doing that up by Superior, Wisconsin quite a bit. I know Dave Flynn did a lot of that in kind of his whole core group there. But yeah, you'd think, up in northern Minnesota where I'm from, Hibbing and Grand Rapids, you'd think that there's enough ice up there that people be doing it all the time, but it's never really taken off up there. Years ago, they did it a little bit, but it just hasn't taken off. So, we got a little tradition here. Number 102, episode 102. Who do you got?
I don't have anybody for 102. I'm gonna have somebody in like 10 shows. Actually, I'm gonna have two people for 111, and one of them is gonna be, some people may not know this, so something to look forward to.
Something to look forward to. So we decided, because once you get over 100, I mean, there's not a lot of cars, 101, 102, 125. I mean, there just ain't. So we're going to transition back. Give me somebody on number 2. Who's somebody that stuck out to you that was a deuce?
I'm going to go with two people. First, I will go with Mike Mitchell. He was a very low buck racer who raced late models at Shino Speedway. I got to know him pretty well through ice racing originally. And, just a story about him. He never won a feature at Shino Speedway. It was always his goal to win a late model feature at Shino Speedway. And, he was leading one feature. He was like a half a lap ahead of the field. I mean, it was his race. There was no denying him. It was his race. And then a late race caution came out, and the second place car was Pete Parker. And the story goes that Parker actually thought he was leading the race because Mitchell was so far ahead of the field. And needless to say, Parker took the lead eventually before the end of the race and won. I believe he won the feature that night.
He's won one or two back in his day. I think he's maybe got 3 feature wins total. I got a lot of races. So,
he's won a couple.
Yeah, just a couple.
The other number 2 I'm going to go with is Lowell Bennett from the Bennett Racing family. We've talked a lot about the Bennett Racing family. Bobby Bennett was the father, so he was number 1. Lowell Bennett was the oldest child, so that's why he's number 2. And Lowell was he's either 81 or 82 Shino Speedway late model track champion. And he probably would have had a lot more championships, but it was shortly after that he made the switch to asphalt late model racing. And several years ago, I asked him why he made that decision, and he said it was about that time when the technology was getting so sophisticated that you couldn't race the same car in both dirt and asphalt. Up until the early 80s, you could do that, but he said he had to make a decision, and he went with the asphalt racing.
Probably less work, and you're right. That's something that a lot of people don't realize is back in the day, obviously if you think back in the 80s and the 70s, the cars were all flat. So, I mean, they had an asphalt setup in them. I mean, even when I was running an affordable chassis in the Super, they had really, really high left side weight set up like an asphalt car. And that was very common. And now the late models all rocked over on the right front and stuff. That ain't going to work on an asphalt track for very long. You might go through a tire or two there. So I got a couple. 102, Carl Fran. Now, the Fran name, this is a gentleman he actually was one of the initial members of WISSOTA, okay? Carl Fran was. And he had a 102. I don't know all of his numbers. His brother, Freddie Fran, was the voice of the Hibbing Raceway, actually the voice of the Northland for many years. But the Fran family heavily involved with dirt track racing, for a very long time, especially up in northern Minnesota. But Carl Fran on the initial board, I saw a picture on Facebook, and I think that Lamb put it on there kind of like hey, here's a 102, because I had no idea that Carl Fran was number 102. I thought that was pretty cool. And then number 2, Red Stefan. He's a guy back in the day. He a 1983 Labor Day shootout winner in the late model class. And I remember him coming up. It was always him and Procknows and Leon Plank and Prusak. They'd always come up to like the Labor Day shootout, the Northern Nationals. Of course, they had the big invitational in Thunder Bay. So I remember seeing him race a lot. And there's still Stefans involved in the racing community. I don't know if those are kids, grandkids, but I know they're related somehow. Somebody could maybe post on there. And there's a bunch of number 2s. There's a couple more 102s, and I feel like I might be missing one. I think Trent Fulmer, somebody might have to post on there. I feel like he was sponsored by a radio station. He might have been 102 in the modifieds, but race fans, when you're listening to this, if you're watching it, if you can think of a number 2 that stuck out to you or a number 102 that stuck out to you, post a picture in the comments. Maybe post a little story about that picture. It's kind of fun to kind of reminisce, especially this time of year where there's not a lot of racing to be had over the next several months. Start posting your favorite drivers, 102s and number 2s, and give us something here to talk about. So this episode, of course, we're brought to you by our friends out in Watertown, South Dakota, Dirt Track Supply. Huge thanks to Ron and Trevor Anderson out there. Trevor put together a great season. Saw a post on Facebook that he's got one modified ready to go for the Bristol Dirt Nationals. He's going to go back down there. He's got another one. He says, I've got an open slot right here for his new aero chassis that he's putting together. He's going to run late models, so be cool to see him doing double duty next year. But racers, this is a time of year. Get your stuff over to them, guys. Have it gone through. Try to get ahead of the 8 ball here. If you need bodies, if you need fab work done, if you need a new chassis, get a hold of them, guys. They can take care of you. And obviously, parts, they haven't been easy to come by, but they'll do everything they can to get you all squared away. So thanks, Ron and Trevor, there. But let's start with this. Let's kind of look back, at the invitational season recap. And really, there was only one in the area, brought to you by our friends over at Vernon Racing. Of course, the Vernon family, they sponsor a ton of race cars. They have for a very long time. Incidentally, Bert, I used to be rivals with them, right? They used to sponsor Darren Murado, and we didn't always play nice together, me and Darren Murado, but they sponsor a lot of guys out there, and they do a lot for the sport, and he wanted to be part of this deal. So we'll talk a little bit about the special that happened this weekend, the inaugural, in its 4th try, the Can-Am Clash up at the Gondiklah Speedway in Superior, Wisconsin. Bert, they've been trying to get this show in for a long time. A long time, like 4 years, and they finally got it in. And leading into it, Tyler Peterson's like, they should just cancel. It's going to be too cold. They should just cancel. I'm like, I can see why you want that, but did you get a chance to watch anything over in Superior? I was pretty impressed. I was skeptical because they hadn't raced since the Northern Nationals. It was a month, right? And I'm like, man, when that place ain't raced on, is it going to tear up? Is it going to get rough? Is it going to be hard on equipment? What's the track going to be like? And they really did a good job up there. It was a good racing surface. What stuck out to you up in Superior, Wisconsin?
I watched the modified and the late model features, and obviously the modified feature was the feature that everybody was interested in because it had the most riding on it. And yeah, I mean, the track was in very good shape. It maybe wasn't as racy, but I mean, it was smooth from top to bottom, and drivers were racing in multiple grooves. So it's not like it rubbered up. But one thing I noticed was, and this was in the modified feature and the late model feature, it seemed like a lot of cars they'd go into the corners and they were pushing to the wall. That I think Sabraski, that was part of his problem. He couldn't keep his car down low. And there was one restart, I think, with like 8 laps to go. He was running second, so he had choice of inside or outside, and he took the outside. And on that restart, the bottom just completely opened up, but he couldn't take advantage of it. And then a few laps later, there's another caution. That time he did take the low side, but you know, it wasn't enough to get the victory. I mean, he gave it everything he had, though, to try to win that race. But I just don't think his setup was just a little bit off. You know, he couldn't keep. You know, the car kept wanting to push towards the wall, and he had a hard time keeping it down low.
You know, I talked to some drivers, and that place was slippery. Now, I'm thinking back when I was racing, you know, especially in my early years, Superior was never a slippery racetrack, right? Superior was known for cowboy up, hammer down, big horsepower, pounding the holes. I mean, that's what Superior, back in the 90s, I hear people complain now about, man, the track was rough. I'm like, dude, you should have been a Superior in the early 90s. You want to talk about rough? I mean, it would eat cars. I mean, it's horrible. And now it's like, it's the slipperiest racetrack out there. And it's weird, right? Because usually you see a track that's black from the bottom all the way to the wall, and you're like, oh boy, she's going to take rubber. It's going to lock down. It's going to be a train race. And it just doesn't seem to do that, which is surprising. I don't know what kind of material they got in the clay or what, but I mean, it gets slippery, and they're not going all that terribly fast around the racetrack, but they can move around. And the biggest thing you got to have overall grip, right? And you hear a lot of people like, well, we got to tighten the car up for the dry. You hear that all the time. We got to tighten the car up for the dry. Well, that's not really a thing anymore, because you can add all the rear traction you want to add, but if that right front ain't gripping, it ain't going to do you no good. So you got to have overall balance. And you can see the cars, they really got a lot of attitude, a lot of character, because they're trying to maximize that side load and get both right side tires gripping through the corner. And you mentioned Sabraski, just a little bit tight. I mean, he wasn't that far off. I'm talking it was that much. A guy that surprised me in the mod feature, Dan Ebert, you know, he was not as good as what I expected. I think he got third in that deal, but he adapted, and he didn't really have a third place car because he was too tight. He really had to muscle that car. And the story coming into that, if people live under a rock, there might be one or two out there that don't know what we're talking about here. So coming into this event, Tyler Peterson had a 2-point lead over Shane Sabraski. Shane Sabraski, if he won the feature, national champ. Anything else happens, it did not matter what else happened, Tyler Peterson was going to be the national champ. Well, I don't know if you saw the heat spurt, but they did a double heat format on Friday. And in the first heat, Tyler Peterson got caught up in something, and I don't know if he bent something there or what happened, but he went straight backwards, eventually pulled off. I think he got caught up in something that wasn't his doing, and it's like, uh-oh, he's in trouble. Sabraski got like 5th in the heat, in his first heat. And I'm like, he didn't look very good either. Dan Ebert didn't look good. I'm like, wow, what's going on here? You know, it's not like the track was horrible. It was just they couldn't get going. And then they finally got it all done. And you looked at the lineup, and you had Sabraski starting. I think he was like third row.
Third row, yep.
Yeah, and Tyler Peterson was back. What was he, like 8th row or something? Like, he was way back in the feature, and it's like, this is going to be interesting. And Jeremy Nelson actually got it done. And of course, you know, I think that's his uncle, Jay McDonald's his uncle, builds J-Car by Jay McDonald. He looked really good. He had a very balanced race car, rotated the corner well, and really did a good job to kind of steal the thunder, so to speak, and steal one from Sabraski and Ebert and all them guys. But he's a good wheelman. He doesn't race a ton, but he got it done. But when it's all said and done, Tyler Peterson, the champion. Now, we're going to come back to that in just a minute, but just a little recap on what went on there. And you can check out my Race Pass for full stats, but Pat Dorr capped off the invitational season in style. The first ever late model feature winner for the Can-Am Clash. And just like a week ago when he drove by Dave Moss to win at Ogilvy, he did it again here. Man, I got to be honest. I think the experience won that race for Dorr both weeks. Dave Moss had a good hot rod. Dave Moss may have had a better car, but I think Pat Dorr's experience, especially at Superior, got the job done for him. What do you think?
Well, Moss was leading and, Dorr was right there, but, he really wasn't challenging for the lead. And Moss was going in a little bit higher, and then he jumped the cushion in 3 and 4 that one lap. And that's when Dorr took the lead. And then, the next lap, then Moss dropped down a little bit lower on the track. So yeah, you're right. I think the experience played a hand in that victory for Dorr. It would have been interesting, if Moss wouldn't have jumped that cushion, if Dorr would have been able to get by him.
Yeah, for sure. And that's one of those things. One little mistake when you have somebody like Pat Dorr behind you, he's going to capitalize every single time. And, it's one of those things, too, where sometimes you're better off if you have a good car. Sometimes you're better off in second, right, as long as it doesn't lock down, which it did not. So if you're in second, you can kind of search and you can move around on the track and you can kind of be strategic. If you're leading, you're kind of a sitting duck. You don't know how hard to go. You don't know if the lines are changing. But when you're second, you can kind of see what's going on. And I think that played in Pat Dorr's favor a couple weeks in a row here. We talked about TPO. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. But Shane Sabraski, we're going to get into him a little bit more. He got it done in the super stocks. And I'm telling you, 100% deserving of a national championship. Nothing against Kevin Burdick because he put together a hell of a season. But I'm telling you, we'll get into some stats here on Sabraski in just a little bit. Unbelievable, Bert, what he did to close out the season in that super stock. I haven't seen dominance like that, I don't think, ever in the super stock division. And when we get into all the numbers of what he did, I mean, it was absolutely impressive. Another guy here, so everybody knows Al Utenin, modified driver, veteran up in Superior. His kid, Brady Utenin, I'm telling you what, that kid is a second-generation driver, really his first, I believe, full year. I think he ran a little bit last year. But, I mean, he really had a coming out year. He is going to win a pile of races next year. And he won night one of the Northern Nationals. And then they had a deal, Bert. I don't know if you saw this, but Race XR, Barry Braun, they put together a deal at the Northern Nationals on Wednesday where they faced off Super Stocks versus Midwest Mods, and it was $2,000 to win that deal. Brady Utenin won that as well, and then he won the inaugural Can-Am Clash in a fourth place finish over at the Labor Day Shootout. So, I mean, he's really starting to turn some heads. Got second both nights on the prelim nights at the Legendary 100. So he got her done there. And like I said, just the racing surface as a whole in Superior, unique, right? Because something that, I mean, the Hibbing cars, all the Hibbing drivers for years, I'd be like, why don't you go to Superior? They pay so good, and they're like, oh, we don't have enough motor. And I'm going to pick on Tyler Kitt. He's a buddy of mine. He got 5th or 6th in Wissota points. I'm like, why don't you race Superior? I hate that hammer down stuff. You've been watching? Right? It's been slippery top to bottom. The Northern Nationals, there wasn't an ounce of traction on the racetrack. It was slippery here. The Hibbing guys used to always be afraid of Superior because it was so hammered down. And now, if you really watch the races, Bert, and Hibbing's not on live streaming a lot, Hibbing is sometimes more cowboy up, especially in the heat races, than Superior. Superior is that track that's shined up top to bottom. So it's kind of did a flip of roles here in recent years, but hats off to them for getting it done. And I talked to a lot of Canadian fans and drivers and a couple of promoters. The border finally opening up here in just a few short weeks. They're super excited for that. And as good as that event went, as good as the Northern Nationals went, they really miss the Canadian fans. I mean, that is such a big contingent at the Gondik Law Speedway. Looking forward to having that back. So we got the fan question of the week. I knew this was coming. Tommy messaged me. He says, fan question of the week. Of course, brought to you by Cowboy Up Racing. That's Shane Howell, the Liberty One ride. Here's the question, Bert. What are your thoughts on the debacle at the Northern Nationals teching issue? We'll get into what happened here in a second, affecting the national championship in the WISSOTA Modified Division. Okay, so I'm going to lay it out. I'm going to get your thoughts. I'll give kind of my perspective, I guess. So here's what happened at the Northern Nationals back, I guess, the week after Labor Day, that weekend, about a month ago. They had two complete shows. On night one, Johnny Broking and Ashley Anderson had an epic battle. I mean, it was an unbelievable race. Broking wins the race. After the feature, there's a measurement on the cross member. He was a quarter inch off, DQ'd. Okay. Did it affect him winning? Not even a little bit. Is it a rule? Absolutely. He was okay with it. He got disqualified. It is what it is. Dave Kane got disqualified for that earlier in the year. So a rule's a rule. I guess it is what it is. Night two, there was a great battle up front between Ashley Anderson and Shane Sabraski. As they were playing kissy face, Jody Belfi capitalized, drove by both of them to win. Really just a right place at the right time and had a good hot rod, got it done. He comes across Tech Bert, and he was too high on deck height. I've heard numbers everywhere from 3/8 of an inch to half to 3/4, whatever. That's immaterial, okay? Minimum of 3/8 over on deck height. They let him go. I don't know I've gotten all kinds of different angles, and I got a couple different varying stories on why. But at the end of the day, the facts of the situation is this. Jody Belfi was high on deck height. That's a fact. Everybody knows it. He admits it, all that, right? They let him go. His dad's tech guy, but sounds like WISSOTA maybe made the call on that deal, and they said there's a half-inch tolerance, which there wasn't a half-inch tolerance at any other race. And did it affect him winning? No. It did not. He flat out was going to win that race if he was an inch lower on the deck height. He just drove a good race and he got the job done. Didn't affect it. The problem came in, though, because the night before, Johnny Broken got DQ'd for something meaningless. And then, of course, Jody Belfi did not. Okay. Now, here's the dilemma. Shane Sabraski, Bert, got second in that feature. The difference in points between first and second is 5 points. He lost the national championship by 1 point. Okay. That might sting him. Okay. So there's the dilemma. Had they disqualified Jody, Shane Sabraski's your national championship. I want your thoughts on that. Then I'll give my perspective.
Well, I mean, it's unfortunate that it impacted the championship. I mean, you always want a champion to be the champion without any asterisk next to it. And unfortunately, with what went down this season, you know, there may be a bit of an asterisk next to this. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say there's an asterisk next to it, but there's controversy with it. And, you know, I agree with you that a rule is a rule. So, I mean, when those drivers got suspended earlier, you know, the other driver should have got suspended for the deck height being too high. I mean, that, you know, a rule is a rule. Unfortunately, this stuff happens not only in racing, but other other sports. I mean, there was the year that the Saints went to the Super Bowl, it was clear pass, or maybe that was the year the Rams went. There was clear pass interference on that one play, and I mean, that cost the team going to the Super Bowl. So, I mean,
the Saints went to the Super Bowl on Bounty Gate. I mean,
well, yeah. But that must have been the year the Rams went to the Super Bowl then. But you know, well, I remember when I was a kid back in 1985, St. Louis Cardinals against the Kansas City Royals in the World Series with the play at first base. And you know, that had an impact. Unfortunately, stuff like that happens.
Yeah, and here's the deal. So I've talked to both parties, and I've really talked to all parties involved. And Shane Zabrowski is one of the most humble individuals you'll ever meet. Class act, one of the best drivers to ever strap in. Polar opposite. They're both good at what they do, but they're totally opposite driving styles. Shane Zabrowski's that smooth momentum, dry slick, just keep that car underneath you. TPO is a bang the cushion, exciting, fun to watch. And I talked to Shane, and he's like, it is what it is. He goes, I can look back over the course of the season at many, many missed opportunities. Okay, I can look back at many missed opportunities where even as recent as the Fall Classic, where he led going into the final corner and Ebert got by him. So he's like, I can look at a lot of times and I can play it back in my mind going, if I would have just did this, I could have won one more race, just one more race. He went through the heart of the season and he was kind of down for a month and a half in the modified. He just was not winning races. So the season's really long, right? It starts at the beginning of April, goes to the middle of October. All he needed to do was find one more win anywhere in there. And that's what he said. He goes, we gave it our best try. Jody's a good friend of his. Everybody's aware that Jody didn't win the feature because of the deck height. Right. No different than Johnny Broking didn't win the feature because of his crossmember height. But a rule's a rule, right? So Shane's not overthinking that. He's not dissecting it, and I talked to him. He's like, hey, I'm okay with it. And that's not to take anything away from TPO, but he said the same thing. On the flip side, he's like, Shane should have got that win. The day that it happened, I was actually down in Madison, talked to him the next day. He goes, Shane got screwed. He should have got that win. A rule's a rule. And his comment was, I don't want to win a championship like that. Now, he didn't, because if you look at what Tyler Peterson did from the end of August to the, kind of up until October, the last couple of weeks weren't quite as good, but he went on a tear. Like he wrote him off like it was going to be Shane Zabrowski's championship, and he came out of nowhere and he got the job done. So it's one of those deals. But as a racer, right? I hate losing more than I like, right? And I still think back, I won the national championship in 2000 and then 04, 05, 06, 07, but in 01, I got second by a point or two. And I think back and I'm like, man, he dodged me that year. He sold some illegal parts online that year over the winter. And it's 20 years later and it still stings. It still pisses me off, right? This one's going to stick with Shane Zabrowski a little bit, but I think Shane's the guy that he's not going to point fingers. He's not going to be like, well, you should have gave me that win. He's not that guy, right? Now, his fans and me on the outside looking in, I'm like, you should have given him that win. He got screwed, but he's not that guy because he's like, he beats himself up more than anything. And he's like, I should have done more. There's more I could have done. But man, it is super unfortunate, Bert. Do you think there'll be an asterisk on that? Do you think that some people in the industry are going to look at that and go, well, Tyler Peterson won, but Shane should have won? Or do you think that that's going to go away pretty quickly? Because, I mean, he earned it. He did what he had to do, but it's kind of a rot.
No, I don't think there's going to be an asterisk next to it. I probably shouldn't have used that term. I think people, I don't even know how many people actually know about what happened. I mean, obviously our listeners know, but I mean, other than our listeners, does anybody even know about these incidents? I don't think there'll be an asterisk. I mean, I think it'll be forgotten pretty quick. And, when you look in the record books, you're going to have a clear champion.
And let's flip the script on this, right? It was end of the year. I think it was in August. There was a night over at the Casino Speedway where Tyler Peterson, in my opinion, got a terrible call there. He was running second behind, I believe, Scott Ward, and you'd have to make the call. It's on Dirt Race Central, but Scott Ward went around, and I thought that Scott should have gone to the back because the contact didn't look to me like that really caused him to spin out. Tyler Peterson came from last to second. So things have a way of working themselves out, right? You sometimes you get a little, sometimes you give a little. That's just the way it is. But at the end of the day, your national champion in the WISSOTA Modifieds, the one TPO Tyler Peterson. And just to really touch on quick, and we're going to do another show on, kind of breaking down the top 25 in these classes. But your national championships this year, rookie Cole Searing, kind of rookie. Do you consider that a rookie, Bert? Even though they didn't have rookie points in 2020, he got rookie of the year and the national championship. But I mean, he really had a full season. Well, not a full season, but most of a season the year before. But Cole Searing, your national champ, I don't know if I really consider him a rookie. Do you?
Yeah, I mean, if he raced a full season last year, but just because you didn't have rookie standings, yeah, I mean, technically, he's a rookie because that's what the rules they decided to go with.
Right.
But yeah, he's really not a rookie.
Right. And he didn't look like a rookie. In fact, he didn't look like a rookie the day he sat in the car. So job well done to him. Sabraski, of course, in the super stocks, the Nightmare Lucas Rodine up in. Now, let's break this down. So Cole Searing, the late model, South Dakota. And then Tyler Peterson, North Dakota, in the modifieds. Bert, how many WISSOTA modified tracks are there in the state of North Dakota?
I have no idea.
Rough guess.
10.
0.
Oh.
So that I found interesting. Your national championship in the mods, he has to travel to every single race he goes to. No home track. Shane Sabraski, Minnesota, Lucas Rodine, North Dakota, in the Midwest mods. And then I believe, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but Parker Anderson dominated the street stock class this year from Wisconsin, street stock national champion. I believe he's the youngest ever national champion in WISSOTA racing. I think he's 18 now. He was 17, but I think he's 18 now. And I think he's the youngest to ever get a national title. Somebody can maybe, if I'm wrong on that, post in the comments below. And then Chad Finkbone up in northern Minnesota in the WISSOTA Pure Stocks. He got his first ever national title. Puka's guy, flat build, Tommy Bowden, I think it is. He got it done in the Mod 4s. And then Travis Olofsson, who they had a tight race coming into the last weekend. He's another northern Minnesota guy. He got it done in the Hornets. So your national championships for WISSOTA. Now, any other thoughts there on the Can-Am class? I'm glad they finally got that show in. I think it was an overall success. I mean, I wasn't a huge car count, but it was a good enough car count to have a good quality show. It looked like the fan count was okay, better on Saturday than it was on Friday. Any closing thoughts up in Superior?
Well, I mean, it's always tough to plan a special in the month of October because you never know what the weather is going to be like. And especially, I mean, in Superior, which is way up north, at least way up north as compared to where I live. And so to be able to finally get the showing, that's really good. And, it looks like, I mean, I'm sure it was a little chilly, but I mean, I think the weather was pretty good considering the time of the year that we're at.
Yeah, I would agree. I was glad though I'm glad that I was able to watch it on Dirt Race Central because I was not interested in being. It was pretty cold there on Friday night. So let's get into some thoughts on the national scene. Not a ton of racing, but of course the biggest Lucas Oil Dirt Late Model event of the year down in Portsmouth, the Dirt Track World Championships. I know you watched that one. You said you couldn't see much of the heat races because it was a little bit dusty.
Yeah.
The races. But what stuck out to you over in Portsmouth?
Well, before we get to some of the excitement that took place there, I just want to make a comment that Scott Bloomquist looked really racy early on in that feature. Unfortunately, he hit a car, a back marker, or a car that was running in the back. Spun, and Scott couldn't avoid it, and I think he kind of slid his car a little trying to avoid and kind of hit it, so his car was kind of caved in the middle on the passenger side. So I mean, I was looking forward to see if he could keep up that pace for the entire race, because he's been fast sometimes this year early in the race, but then he fades. So I was curious to see if he could stay up there, but obviously that wasn't meant to be, considering that accident. And, everybody, well, actually our sure bets of the week last week were Overton, Superman, and Brandon Shepard. And
we were closer.
I mean,
we were closer.
Hopefully nobody took our sure bets and actually went to Vegas and placed a bet, especially if you went with Puka's sure bet.
Yeah, I mean, he got lapped 100 times. So, I mean, that didn't go very well for him. We'll talk about that in just a second. Speaking of Bloomquist, I got a question. Has he had a year where he hasn't won a feature? Because he won one late last year, kind of like some regional local deal down south about this time of year. But would this be the first year that Bloomquist has not won an A-main?
Possibly. Yeah, I mean, I mean, I guess if any of our listeners know the answer to that, chime in. I mean, we did find out that there was another driver who won both the World of Outlaw Championship and the Lucas Championship than what we said last week, and that was Josh Richards. We forgot to mention Josh Richards. So
his woes continue. My goodness. You just, yeah. So the heat races, they got a little interesting, right? I mean, of course, it rained out the first night, so they had to run a day race. And so they started at like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, or whatever. And in one of the heats, it was kind of top dominant in the heat races for a few of them anyway. The front row was Fergie on the inside pole and Brandon Shepard on the outside pole. And Fergie got a good start, and they come into turn one, and he chucked a slider on him. And I watched it no less than 10 times. He cleared him by at least a car length. I had to watch it close because it was so dusty you couldn't see, right? But he cleared him by a bunch. And when he cleared him, I don't know if Shepard kind of wowed up or if he just overmissed his mark, hit the marbles and pushed. But he lost, I don't know, a handful of spots on that deal, fell back, relegated him to go to a B main. Ferguson won the feature. Bert, why don't you take us through what you saw happen after that event, after that heat race?
Well, I mean, I didn't see anything after the heat race, but from what I heard was that, and I read a story. I mean, actually, shortly after it took place, I mean, obviously on Facebook, that was this chatter on Facebook, and there were all these different stories, that, Mark Richards punched Fergie in the car, and then Fergie's crew members went after Mark Richards. So I read an article afterwards, and the Rocket House car, they always have that little mini bike thing that they drive around the pits. And apparently Mark Richards was riding around on that. And when Fergie pulled into the pits after the race, he drove over to Fergie's car, and Fergie says that Richards grabbed the window net. Richards denies that he grabbed the window net, but apparently through all of that, some of Fergie's crew members kind of pulled Richards or jumped Richards or did something to Richards.
Get the hell out of Richards. and it's kind of funny, Bert, because they said he threw a bunch of punches in the back of the head, and Mark Richard, and I quote, said, paraphrase, but it's kind of his quote says, it's not like he hit very hard, right? Like he kind of, they threw that into the article, like he hit like multiple times in the back of the head, but there was not much force behind it or something like that.
And so, I mean, I'm not exactly sure what happened other than what I read. But obviously officials felt it was bad enough on both parties that both Bishop and Fergie were disqualified from the rest of the show, which was really unfortunate for Fergie because he was supposed to start fourth, I believe, in that feature. Yep. And so, I mean, that really cost him more than Bishop because he was going to go through a consi. And I mean, he's not a regular on the Lucas, so there was no guarantee he was even going to make that feature. And this will be my hot take. If this was a World of Outlaw event, it wouldn't. Richards wouldn't, or Bishop would not have been disqualified.
How would Fergie?
That I don't know. Maybe they wouldn't have disqualified anybody, but there's no way that the Rocket House car gets disqualified in a World of Outlaw event.
No, I agree. So here's my take on this deal. Okay, is I'll watch the racing deal. We'll post it here on the video so people can see it. But I'll be honest with you, like Mark Richards had no reason to be mad, and I'm thinking like it was so dusty, right? That as bad as Brandon Sheppard pushed when the slider happened, I can see how he was like he had no quarter panel, had to. I mean, it was he came across his nose because things happen quick on the racetrack, and when it's that dusty, you might not have a good vision of what happened. So then he, in his mind, he probably literally thought that Ferguson came in and did that because he shoved the nose. It looked like it. The first time I watched it, it kind of looked like it. When I went back and watched them, like, wait a second, they weren't even close. So I can see why he thought that. But I'm guessing now, right? Because you notice they practiced together just a couple days ago down in Charlotte. Rocket had a test session, and Ferguson came. They talked. And they got everything all squared away. It sounds like everything's all good, right? But I'm guessing that after Mark Richards saw that video, he had to backpedal. He had to look at it and go, shit, I didn't see what I thought I saw. Because he overreacted in a big way. None of this would have happened, none of it, if he wouldn't have driven up next to Ferguson's car.
Right.
I mean, if he would have just been like, hey, it is what it is, and went back to but let's face it, the Rocket house car hasn't won a big show this year. They're the defending champions of that event. They were in a B main. It's been a frustrating year. It's been it was already a frustrating night because they were not even going to start on the front row in a B. I think they're supposed to start like second or third row in the B main. And like you said, they weren't guaranteed a spot in the A main. So there was a lot of frustration brewing up. And he points, he's like, oh, we've had this issue with Fergie before. I'm telling you, man, that I've seen some dirty sliders. That was not a dirty slider at all. And, I talked to a few different people, Jeff Krause and all that. And he's like, when they're throwing punches like that, don't kick them out. That's hurting the fans. That hurts the fans. These are two drivers that the fans paid money that they want to see race. Don't kick them out. Fine them. And if you fine them, take that money, kind of like the NFL does. In the NFL, when they fine the players, that money goes to charity. Mm-hmm. Did you know that? So do the same thing here. Fine them. Say, look, here's the deal. You guys had an altercation. We're going to fine you. You start where you start. You're going to race. We're going to fine you. That money goes to a charity. They can pick a charity. They can do something with that money. That whole kicking them out after that deal, I think that was misguided. I'm not a firm believer in that.
Well, and I mean, like I said before, I mean, Fergie was the big loser in this deal because he was supposed to start fourth in the feature. So, I mean, this could have cost him a good chunk of change. And, I don't condone fights and stuff, but if Richards did grab the window net or, was going after Fergie, I mean, does Fergie's pit crew have a right to protect their driver? I mean, you're going to punish a driver because his pit crew was protecting him. That's where it gets a little dicey.
Yeah, and that's where whoever initiated the deal, they should have got a bigger penalty. And it was initiated by Mark Richards. Now, there's 700 different stories. People, I don't believe, in fact, even Ferguson's comments, he wasn't punching Ferguson. That never happened. Maybe when that four-wheeler made contact with them, he reached in and grabbed the window net. Maybe he grabbed the window net before. I don't know. We didn't see it. But needless to say, if he would have just not been there in the first place, it wouldn't have happened. Right. That's simple as that. And I get it. Racing gets heated. It just does. I mean, we're passionate about it, and all them emotions go. But, I think that Lucas Oil is very quick to just throw you out. It's like, that's not, is it hurting the driver more? Okay, you're a race fan, you go to a race, you want to watch certain drivers. You take a guy, Ferguson really got hurt. Because like you said, he was starting fourth, guaranteed, I think it was $2,000 or $2,500 or something like that to start the feature. So he lost out on that, sure, but he had a really legitimate shot to win that race or finish in the top three and make some real good money. But Bishop, he probably would have made the feature, but that ain't guaranteed. He may not have, because some of the cars in the B were pretty stout. Does that penalize the driver or the fan more?
I mean, yeah, it penalizes the fan, because the fan is paying money to watch the best racers race, and if you're kicking racers out, they're not seeing the best racers race. And honestly, I do think that it penalizes the drivers differently also, because I think it penalized Fergie more than it did Brendan Shepherd, just because, Shepherd is racing the Rocket House car. Pretty much everything is provided, best of everything. And Fergie, I don't know what his team situation is, but I'm sure it's not to the level of what the Rocket House car is.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So at the end of the day, both of them got disqualified, and I just want to mention a mod guy won the feature. A mod guy. RTJ got it done and really upset, in my opinion, the big two this year, Overton and JD. Overton had the lead in that race, and it looked like it was under control, and then there was kind of a stretch of cautions there, and RTJ had an aggressive pass, kind of used the quarter panel a little bit, did what he had to do, and he drove off to get a $100,000 payday. JD came from pretty deep. He got up onto the podium there, and I was a little bit nervous because you and I are tied. And I'm like, oh, crap, here comes Davenport, and Overton was leading, so we're still tied in the points. But how big of an upset was that? You look at RTJ, and he's had kind of an up and down year. The second half of the year hasn't been great. How big of an upset was that RTJ beating Overton and passing him to win?
I think it was a pretty big upset. Considering the season that Overton is having, and even the season that Superman's having, and the fact that Overton was actually leading the race, and Thornton passed him for the lead late in the race on a restart to kind of snookered him a little bit on that restart. And Thornton got off to a good start this year, but then he kind of went through. Is he a rookie this year, or is this his second? So went through the rookie lumps of long grueling season, and this is a great way to end the season in the Lucas Oil Series, and I think they can build on this over the off season. They have a lot of positive energy going their way now. Yeah,
for sure. That $100,000 payday, that could make a season that was kind of lackluster feel like you're on top of the world. That's a big win. Congratulations to him. And then, the track conditions, right? I saw a lot of banter on Facebook. Oh, the track was terrible. They got to do something different. I got a different spin on it, right? So how many late model races have we seen that, like, literally they lock down early in the race? It's one lane rubber. Nobody can go anywhere. It wasn't that. It was dirty. It was dusty. It was marbly, but you could still pass. You could still race.
They had the heat races in the afternoon, though. It's a little bit of a different situation. It wasn't the normal night of racing if they would have been able to run like they normally do.
Right. But I didn't think it was bad. As far as moving around on the track, I'd rather have dust and multiple lanes, right, than one lane train. Where did Davenport start? He had to start outside the top 10, right?
I thought they said he started 17th.
Yeah, I thought he started pretty deep.
And
he drove up to the podium. So
Devin Moran led the first portion of that race, and you thought that he was going to win that thing, and then he just faded like really fast, and I think he wound up like 15th or so, somewhere in that area.
Yeah, and that's a tire deal, right? Because they talked about he had a little softer tire on, so he was good early and faded. And it sounds like RTJ sounds like he went with a harder tire compound, And it sounds like there might have been like a little bit of a heated discussion there with his crew guy. Like they were talking about tires, and he's like, oh, "We're going with this," and the crew guy's like, "No, he ain't." And they gambled on the tire; it paid off.
Yeah, I don't know if it was a heated discussion, but yeah, it sounded like Ricky said we're running the 40, and the guy kind of looked at him like, "We are."
And the right call was made. I mean, when you get into a long race like that, I mean, that showed that tire deal is a big deal. So, needless to say, RTJ, the 2021 Dirt Track World Championship winner over at Portsmouth, and of course, T-Mac locking up. He did that a week ago, but locked up his first ever Lucas title.
And think about that. This is RTJ's rookie year in the series. I mean, it's almost his rookie year in a late model. I mean, he has raced late models in the past. So for him to, make that call and his team stick with that call, I mean, that shows a lot of confidence in their driver.
Right. Absolutely. And rightfully so. I mean, the kid's won in about everything. And, I think he's got a bright future. A lot of the young guys do in dirt late model racing. The future of the national dirt late model season or series, all the different series, is really bright. There's a lot of youth. There's a lot of young drivers that are extremely talented. And I think that we're seeing more of them emerge, which is cool, like Ashton Winger, who wasn't there. But there's another young guy that's emerging. There's a lot of them. So down in Batesville, we'll talk a little IMCA stock car racing, right? Well, a couple weeks back, they had the Race for Hope 74 50,000 win IMCA mods. They've been putting on some big shows. Of course, they got a 50 grand to win the Topless next year, the Lucas Oil race. And it seems like 50 grand to win is their thing down there because they had the World IMCA Stock Car Championships, $50,000 to win for an IMCA stock car. That has to be the biggest paying win in the history of IMCA stock cars. Talk about that. You got I'll let you do your homer call here.
Excuse me. Hold on. Yeah, the $50,000 came back to Wisconsin, more specifically northeastern Wisconsin. Benji Lacrosse, who is just an amazing driver, won the $50,000. He started third row inside, but you got to remember they started 3 wide in this race. So, so it was 6. So he started 7th, and he was up to second by lap 2 or 3. And it was actually a really good race through. I mean, the race was 70 laps long, 71 laps, something like that. And probably through the first 50 laps, I mean, it was side by side, bumper to bumper. It was a really exciting race to watch. And well, they have a fuel stop in this race, which it was funny because it's like, okay, we're going to have a fuel stop. And then the announcers were contemplating, how many people are going to put fuel in? Well, it's like, if it's a fuel stop, aren't you going to put fuel in? And well, they were contemplating that, well, maybe some, but why wouldn't, well, they were saying maybe you won't put fuel because you don't want to mess with the balance of the car if you're running well and that sort of thing. But I mean, you don't want to cut it close and be running, up front and not have the extra fuel. So, but anyway, Benji held on, probably the last 10, 15 laps for more of a single file type deal. I mean, if you passed, you kind of had to nudge the driver in front of you because it was kind of, everybody was racing right on the bottom. But yeah, Benji Lacrosse, $50,000 winner. It was interesting because he went directly to victory lane after the race, and he got to victory lane, and they told him, you got to scale. And I mean, I've been to races where if you do that, you get disqualified. So I mean,
really?
Yes. So luckily, I mean, they're understanding, and it's only right. So so he went and scaled, and everything was fine. And Benji, I've interviewed Benji a lot, and I know him a little bit, and he's more of a reserve driver. He doesn't necessarily say a lot. He doesn't necessarily show a lot of emotion, but he showed some emotion after he got out of the car he was up on top of the roof and of the car, and celebrating. So great victory for him. He's won a lot of money this year, and in a stock car alone, well, he won a $10,000 show in Minnesota, and then he won the King of the Creek. That was $10,000. Now he won this $50,000. So he's won $70,000 in 3 races in a stock car. And then if you add in some of his modified stuff, because he won a $7,000 race in a modified and a $3,500 race in a modified, he he's pocketed
over 80 grand in 5 events. It'd be interesting to see if you did the math, because let's face it, most stock car races are, I don't know, $300-400 to win, maybe. IMCA mod race, $400 to $600 to win, somewhere in that range. It'd be interesting to see if you did the numbers on it. Did he eclipse $100 grand in winnings?
Yeah, in a modified this year, he ran 30 races and he got 9 wins, 15 top 5s, 21 top 10s. He won the Eric Van Eyck Memorial race at the Berg Speedway in Luxembourg. That was 7,000. He led 1 lap in that race, and actually, the King of the Creek, he led 1 lap too, and he won $10,000 in that race. So he won $17,000 and led 2 laps in those 2 races.
Nice.
But he was the Mod Mania champ at the Berg Speedway. That was $3,500 to win, and he was a 2021 track champion at the Berg Speedway in a modified. Stock car, he ran 17 races, got 4 wins, 10 top 5s, 11 top 10s. Won at Batesville, obviously, and won the Land of 10K Lakes at North Central Speedway in Minnesota. That was 10,000. And then the King of the Creek at 141 Speedway. That was 10,000. So hell of a year.
Yeah, you ain't going to have mama saying you can't do this anymore if you're making $100 grand and winning. So that's a hell of a season to him. And there was a caution. There was a green, white, checkered finish in that one too. That's kind of a nail biter. 50 grand to win. Never won that kind of money ever in your entire life. And there's a yellow with a green, white, checkered. Even though it was 1 lane, man, I can just imagine his heart rate going, beating outside of his chest that, like, hit my marks, don't nothing screw up. Hopefully the guy behind me doesn't turn me, bankboard me, whatever. But he actually kind of drove away there after that restart. He jacked him enough to where it wasn't in contention. Now, I have a question for you, right? Because the format down there is they had 3 complete shows, and I didn't see if there was pay for the prelim nights or not. The pay was amazing all the way through for the main event. But they had 3 prelim nights, and basically the first prelim night, if you finished in the top 8, that was the inside row. The next 8 was, I think, the middle, and then the outside, or whatever, something along those lines. And I've always wondered, right, when drivers go into a show like that on night 1, they finish back 7th, 8th, right, somewhere in that neighborhood. And next thing you know, they're like, well, I'm going to take my spot, because they had the option to take their spot or not take their spot. Now, if you get 7th on night 1, you're going to start, it would be 19th in the feature. The level of competition at that event, I'm telling you, it's pretty darn tough to win from 19th. Yeah, period. Okay, and I'll touch on why I brought this up. If you got 7th or 8th on night 1, would you be like, I'm taking it, I'm in the feature? Or would you be like, screw that? What would you do?
I'm not a gambler, so I would keep my spot.
Go ahead.
I'd just be happy to be in the feature. Obviously, if a lot of the drivers drove a long ways to get there, so I think your number one goal has to be to get into the race, and then once you're into the race, then you try to win.
God dang, I got to disagree. And I'm going to give a donkey award to my buddy Timmy Johnson, Sasquatch. All the years that we raced against each other, I'd give him a lot of donkey awards for that. He'd probably give me a couple as well. But he got 7th on night 1. And I'm telling you, this is one of the most talented drivers that's ever strapped in. He can just jump in anything and contend. I've seen him jump in cars where people are like, what the heck is that piece of crap? And he's up in the top 3. Like he's a very talented driver. I was excited to see him down there. But he gets 7th night 1. He's like, I'm just taking it. He starts 19th in the feature. Me, I'm like, I am not driving that far to make the feature. I'm driving that far because I want a legit shot to win the feature. You ain't winning from 19th. He had a good run. He got up inside the top 10. I think he got 7th maybe in the feature from starting back in 19th, but you ain't going to win. You basically effectively said on day 1, like, I concede, I'm in, I'll just finish where I finish. I'm not even going to try to win the race because you ain't going to happen. All the top drivers are going to be up front. It's one thing to pass, get up into the top 10. It's a whole nother situation to drive by them. And how many times, Bert, have you seen where a big race like this, the prelim nights are all good, you get to the main event, it can lock down. There's kind of one lane on the bottom. Whoever had track position, if you got up in the front, you were going to have a legitimate shot to stay in the front, right? I look at that, I'm like, what the hell is he thinking? Why would you do that? And he basically told my buddy, he says, hell with it. We're going to drink some beer the next couple of days. We're in. It's all good. And I'm like, I'm just far too competitive to do that. I'm like, man, you go there to try to win the race, right? I'm not trying to make the race. I want to win the race. It's like how many times you've seen people get provisionals, and yeah, sometimes they work up through the field. And a lot of times the people that get provisionals make about 4 or 5 laps. They exit stage right and they collect their start check. I don't know. I look at that. I'm like, if you have a shot to win, if you're a good racer, you have a shot to win the race. If you're going to start that far back in a situation like that, to me, I'm like, scrap it. I'd rather not make the show than start in the back of the show. I will. I want to win. I'm going to do what I can to put myself in the best position to win. I was really disappointed that did not happen. So another thing that stuck out down at that race, Bert, hot laps. Kind of reminds me of the old Allen Iverson. We're talking about practice. We're talking about practice. There was 2 rollovers in hot laps on night 1. And it sounds to me, and I don't know this 100%, but it sounds to me like both of them had throttle stick. Sounds like both of them. One of them might be Mike Mullen in Ricky Lemon's ride, the 99. He rolled over. Another guy rolled over, actually exited, went right over the fence or right over the wall into the fence. The wall ain't very high. It's only a couple feet high. But he went right over it into the fence, and they had to kind of prop up the fence to hold it up for the rest of the night. But 2 rollovers and hot laps. But kind of an interesting thing there with Ricky Lemon. So one of the drivers that was there, Terry Phillips was driving his other car.
Grabowski.
Yeah, Jordan Grabowski. He had to leave. Like, I don't know what happened. He had to leave. So after hot laps, he went and bought Jordan Grabowski's car so that Mullen could go ahead and finish it. How did Mullen, did he make the show? And B, if he did, how did he do?
He did not make the show.
He did not make the show?
No.
So interesting deal. Number one, 2 rollovers and hot laps. It wasn't rough. So when I initially thought that, I'm like, well, maybe it was Cowboy Up. It was rough. They just hooked some ruts. But it was just a couple rollovers, which you don't see that very often. But you also don't see somebody buying a car after hot laps to finish out the show. I thought that was pretty interesting, and it's kind of a whatever it takes mindset right there. But, man, congratulations to Benji Lacrosse, $50,000 payday. That is absolutely incredible. So what do you say, Bert? Let's get into some who's hot and who's not. Do you have anything else you want to touch on Batesville before we jump off?
No, other than Jake Kim finished around 12th or so, I believe.
Okay, and he has a win or two. I think running it as a USRA car, so good to see there. So who's hot, who's not? Brought to you by our friends over at Blue Line Brews. Of course, we ain't got Puka up here holding up the coffee. This is coffee. So Bert, get this. My mom, right? She's like, so what kind of alcohol? She didn't know what it was. She thought it was alcohol. She had no idea. I'm like, Mom, it's coffee. Oh, well, I'm going to order some of that. So she actually jumped on the link and she ordered some coffee, all kinds of different brews. And kind of the story is Blue Line Brews is a company that gives that blue line, right, the thin blue line, they support law enforcement. Injured and fallen officers, money goes back to that. Just a great cause. Click in the links below. Get yourself, if you drink coffee, why not support those who support us? And Blue Line Brews is a great company, so give them a try. But who do you have on Who's Hot, Bert?
Well, obviously, I got to put Benji Lacrosse on there. I mean, if you win $50,000 in a stock car race, you got to be on the Who's Hot list. Also, I have Pat Dorr. He, just racking up the victories once again in invitational season. And also, if you win $100,000, you got to be on the hot list. So Ricky Thornton Jr.
There you go. All three good picks. I had Pat Dorr on there as well. But a guy I have on there in the late model is Dave Moss. Boy, he started out the beginning strong. Like he had a few wins to right away in the beginning of the season, and then he hurt a motor, and he had like 2 months or so where I'm like, he's just a non-factor. Like this dude is like, I don't know what happened, but he's a non-factor. Come invitational season, he went to the sites, he got 5th, which is solid, and then 4 straight top 2s. He got 2nd at the 100. He got 2nd at the Fall Classic. He got 2nd at the Can-Am Clash, and then he won the Piston Cup, the inaugural Piston Cup at Granite City. That's a hell of a way to close out a season right there in a WISSOTA late model. So Dave Moss on that list. Another guy that I have on the list here is Brandon Overton. Okay, yes, he got 2nd. Yes, he got passed by RTJ. But Bert, I was looking at his numbers. 20 of his last 21 finishes, top 4. That's
pretty good.
Unbelievable. And the other one, right, was 6th. So in 21 straight shows, he has one show worse than 4th, and it was a 6th place finish. And that dates all the way back to where he got 2nd at the USA Nationals in the beginning of August. So he got basically all of August, all of September, half of October, where he has only one night he finished worse than 4th place. So Brandon Overton, absolutely red hot. And then Shane Sabraski in the Superstock. Now, he's still in the modified. He closed out the season pretty strong. He was in the conversation at every race. But listen to this in the Superstock. The Can-Am Clash, he just won that. He won the Fall Classic. He won the Piston Cup. He won both days of the Paul Bunyan Stampede in Bemidji. He won the 100. He won the prelim to the 100. He won the finale at the KRA Speedway. He won the Labor Day show at Madison. And then he had a horrible night in Madison at their finale. He got 2nd. Northern Nationals, he got a 1st and a 2nd. Labor Day shootout, he got a 1st. The fall or the I guess the WISSOTA Classic in Grand Rapids, he got 2nd. And then he had his one blemish basically from the beginning of September on was the Red Clay Classic, where he finished 6th, but he started deep and got the hard charger. Unbelievable dominance to close out the season and win the national title. So Shane Sabraski would be my other guy for the hot list right there. Who's not?
I am leading that off with the Rocket House Car Team.
Are you reading my notes?
No, I'm not. And then I'm gonna go with Shane Clanton. I mean, he's always been a World of Outlaw regular. This year he switched to Lucas. With the World of Outlaws, you always expected him to finish in the top 3, 4 in the point standings. In the Lucas series this year, he finished 9th in the standings. He's led some races and had some bad luck where he had flat tires and stuff like that. And then rounding out my top 3 is Kyle Bronson. Mid-season, he was running really well, but you really haven't heard much. You haven't heard his name since then.
Right. And he was running pretty good. He broke some drive shaft, and he broke a drive shaft.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yep. So I have the Mark Richards Rocket One race team too. So, I mean, obviously what happened, right? But I never in a million years, I mean, it was late the season before they really got their first win, before they got anything going. But this has to be the first year where they don't have a big win, no marquee wins in a long time. And I mean, whether it was him or Josh Richards driving the car, don't matter. But that Rocket House Car team, no crown jewel wins this season. So they got to look at this, even though they're going to win, though they did. They locked up the World of Outlaws late model championship. It just really, because it's lack of competition in that series, that's why they won that deal. So that's a disappointing deal. Josh Richards continues to just have his woes. Did he bring out the caution where RTJ passed Overton? Was that his caution? Because he brought out one of them late cautions. I'm like, oh, of course, there's Richards, another flat tire. I mean, I don't know what his deal is. Like, he gets flat tires more than anybody in dirt late model racing. I just don't understand it. And then, so that's all I got for the not list right now. I kind of reluctantly, I'll add Shane Edgerton to there because as good of a season as he had, a lot of top fives, I expected to see more from him come invitational season, and he just did not. He did not have a run of anything during the invite season, so I'll put Shane Edgerton on the list as well. So our picks from last week, Bert. Okay, looking at our notes here, you and I are the only two that had one correct pick. We didn't have a lot of picks last week. We both had Pat Noor. I had Overton. You had JD at the Dirt Track World Championship, and we're both on the outside looking in. And but Pat Noor, now that puts you and I, we're still tied at 29. Okay, we're tied. And Jeff's at 20, Pete and Puka are at 16, Keith's at 13. And this week we got a couple races that we're picking. We're picking over at Bulls Gap, the Volunteer Speedway. That's tonight, Wednesday night. The Castrol Flow Racing Night America. We're picking that race, and then we're picking the World of Outlaw sprint car race this weekend. So only two this weekend for us. And man, I'm going to have to get them right because I'm sick of being tied with you already. I need to get back ahead of here. So with that said, looking at it, okay, sure bets of the week. Who is your lock? Give me your lock of the week for this week.
Brad Sweet is going to put his bad luck behind him and poor performance behind him, and he is going to be back in victory lane at Lakeside Speedway.
He's been on the naughty list. He's been on the not hot list. So that'll be interesting to see. I mean, if he does, he's going to close out the championship. And let's say right now, if he doesn't, if he has another bad night, Gravel could potentially get within striking distance and make a race of this at the end of the year. Just because I like the points battles, I'm nothing against Brad Sweet, but I hope he blows a motor on lap one and Gravel wins. So we have a battle coming into the end of the year, but not to wish ill will on anybody. I am going to take the Ironman Shane Sabraski to not just win a feature at the Topless, the final race of the year up in our area, but he's going to win the supers and the mods at the Big O this weekend. So Shane Sabraski doubling up in 7A. So let's get to the last lap, Bert. Brought to you by our friends over at Zuli Race Engines. Of course, Frank, a great supporter of the show, builds engines for winners. Of course, the national champion in the street stocks, Parker Anderson. And, you know, this is the time of year. Get your engine stuff over to him. Get it freshened up. Get it changed. If you need a new engine, give Frank a call. It's proven winners right there, Zuli Race Engines. So, Overton's quest for $1 million. I got to be honest, when he was leading that race, Bert, I'm like, he's going to be $100,000 closer. Didn't quite get it done. What do you have a number in front of you? What he's at? I can look it up here. But
according to the person who is keeping track for us, it's 832,000.
Yeah, and that's Goose. That's our buddy Goose there. Yeah. So yeah, he's got him down at 832,000 on winnings. Now you got Vegas coming up. That's $100,000 to win. Okay, and there's a few races in there, 10, 15, 20. Man, if he would have won, that would have been $80,000 more because I think he got $20,000 for second. He would have been over 900. Now he has to win Vegas. If he doesn't win Vegas, it's not going to happen. Yeah. But if so now it'll be interesting. We're going to go your over under. We're going to give you this again. Is he going to get $1 million?
I'm still going to say under.
I'm still going to go over. I'm confident he's going to win in Vegas, so that's going to be the telltale sign. Big Sexy looking for $1 million in earnings in 2021. Go ahead.
Just before we set to record, I looked at he only has 2 races on his schedule right now, but it does say that more races will be added. But right now he only has the Outlaw Final and then Vegas.
Yeah, I kind of followed his stuff all year long, and basically that he's never really too far ahead. And I think that's kind of his schedule, right? He's like, well, I'm going to look at what's going on. I'm going to look at the weather. And we might go here, but if the weather's bad, we might go to this special here. There might be some of that going on. And that's kind of that independent schedule that he has. So we don't talk NASCAR very much, but, oh, man, when this guy comes to it, Kyle Larson, what's going on with him?
Well, he just continues to win in the NASCAR's top series. He won again last weekend, won in Texas. I believe he's the only driver that's secured a spot in the next round of the playoffs because you secure a spot with wins, and he's won, I think, the last 2 races. So
yeah, he's in the final. He's in the final. I think there's 2 races to go, 8 wins on the year. This kid's impressive. He really is. I mean, we're gonna look back at this 20 years from now and be like, hey, we got to see Kyle Larson as he was really emerging. I mean, it's a rare thing to see. As dominant as that kid's been in every aspect of the sport, it's kind of fun to follow him. So the XR Dirt Late Model Super Series, they brought their schedule out last week, and kind of the big talk was, what the hell is he running against the Dream for? What is he thinking, right? Why would he do that? Well, great move by Barry Braun over at Race XR. They now moved the Belleville High Banks race to June 13th and 14th, right after the Dream. Bert, how big of a deal is that?
I think it's a big deal. I mean, some people say, well, the Dream doesn't have the prestige that the World 100 does. So, what's the big deal? You can schedule against that, but it's still the Dream, and it's been an annual race since the 1990s, late 1990s, and at historic Eldora, you just don't schedule against a race like that. I think it's huge because now, I mean, you're guaranteed to get the top driver, the very, very top drivers at the Dream, where otherwise probably would have been split a little bit.
Yeah, otherwise you're giving them options there. So I think that's a great move on his part, and play a little conspiracy theory on this one. Tony Stewart's got some pretty deep pockets, and obviously he doesn't want any competition for that event. Do you think when he saw that, he's like, all right, we'll sponsor your event, just get it the hell off of ours? Do you think maybe that was a power play by Barry to say, we're going to schedule on top yours to see if you can get some money out of Tony? Do you think maybe some of that happened?
I didn't even think of that, but that is a good conspiracy theory.
I'm not saying that happened, but hey, why not? Give it a try. So speaking about Race XR, they have they help with the Twin 25s up at the Gondiclaw Speedway in Superior. They just posted an announcement. They wanted to get it ahead. That event for the 2022 season is going to be Friday, July 22nd, the night before the Month of Money race, which is $5,000 to win down at the Cedar Lake Speedway. So Lucas Oil NLRA, they had their season finale this past weekend. I know that you got to watch the end of that one. Tell us what happened there, Bert.
Yeah, I mean, great racing there. I mean, one thing on the show we've talked, like earlier this year, we talked about the World of Outlaw series and the Lucas series, which has the best star power. And to be honest with you, I really don't care about star power. I would go to any of these races in Northern Illinois with this contingent of Midwest drivers because they put on a hell of a show. Definitely worth the price of admission. And I mean, it looked like Brian Shirley had that race in the bag, and then there's a late restart. I don't know, with like 5 laps to go, and Heckenass was coming on the high side and lost the race by about 3/4 of a car length. And if that race would have been another lap longer, Heckenast would have won that.
And he wasn't even in second on the restart, so he had to pass a couple guys to get there. He was charging up top. That was at Tri-City over in Granite City, Illinois. Tony Jackson Jr. crowned the champion of the Lucas Oil MLRA series. Now, not a lot of racing going on this weekend. There's a couple things going on, though. Up in Bedford, Pennsylvania, they have the Keystone Cup for late models. Each Friday features Saturday, 25,000 to win up there. With not a lot of stuff going on this weekend, who's some guys that you might expect to see up in Pennsylvania?
I mean, I would think you'd see like Ziegler and Satterley.
Yeah. Do you think we'll see anybody other than that? Do you think you'll see like a guy like Brandon Overton say, look, it's 25 grand to win, I'll go up there? Do you think you'll see, any regional guys? Maybe, I know Dennis or Junior's not going. He's going a different direction. But it'd be interesting to see if they can pull anybody from out of the area up there. Maybe pull in like a Devin Moran or Hudson O'Neill or somebody like that. It'll be interesting to see. Now, Florida is having the richest dirt late model race of the year over at the Alltech Speedway. 26,000 to win. Bert, it's crates. It's crates. Okay, so now I saw a post. Jimmy Owens and Kyle Bronson both have a ride. They're driving for somebody in lookalike cars. But what is your thoughts on the biggest paying race? I mean, you got the whole Winter Nationals down there, right? You got all the races in the Winter Nationals, but the highest to win race is a crate late model race. What is your thoughts on that?
I mean, obviously the promoters must think that they can make money. I mean, there are some big paying crate races. I mean, let's not forget AJ Dima won $50,000 racing crates. So,
right.
Drivers can make, there are some high dollar crate races. And I mean, there's a slew of crates down in that area as far as I know. So
a lot. They got a lot down there. It's big down there.
And that's why, I mean, in northeastern Wisconsin, they tried doing crates, but they just couldn't get enough crate cars to make it work.
Here's a question. So first of all, is that a slap in the face of super late model racing, right? When you have the Lucas Oil Series, the World of Outlaw Series, they come into town. You got the Southern All-Stars. You got all them races coming into town, and they're getting 10, 12, 15,000 to win. But hey, we're just going to go ahead and pay the crate class 25,000 to win. Is that or 26,000? I should say. Is that a little slap in the face? Do you think the big, the traveling late model series should be upset about that? Going, why aren't we getting paid like that? There's a lot more money involved in that. Do you think they should be upset about that?
I don't necessarily know if they should be upset about it, but I'm sure it crosses their mind.
I would have to think so. So that leads me to this question, okay? So speaking of WISSOTA late model racing, and we've talked in depth about this, kind of imploding from the outside over in eastern Wisconsin. You got the Dirt King stuff going on over there. Over in, the western side, southern South Dakota, you have the tri-state stuff going on. But you look at the engine rules for a WISSOTA late model, okay, and they got their concept or their spec motor, which is basically you can run it in WISSOTA events. Yeah, you can run Tri-State and Dirt Kings, but they got all kinds of different options. Now, this is kind of an interesting question. Should WISSOTA look at a plan over the next few years, phase it in, where they transition from like their current late model engine program, completely scrap that altogether and go specifically to a crate deal like they have down south?
I don't think so.
Give me a reason why. Sell me on it.
It seems like, I mean, I don't know if it would be the case in western Wisconsin and Minnesota, but like in eastern Wisconsin, crate late models were considered to be a lower class than, you know, the WISSOTA late models. It just didn't have the same prestige. You know, fans really, oh, it's a crate car. It's not a late model. It's a crate car.
Let me ask you this. So you're a diehard fan. You know the difference, but casual Joe Blow that doesn't know the difference between a street stock, a modified, and a late model, do they know the difference?
No. And I think that was part of the problem, particularly with Shawano Speedway, was they were running WISSOTA late models and fast track crate late models in the same program. So you'd have one set of late models come out for races, and then later on in the show, you have another set of late models come out for races, but the cars look basically the same. And yeah, I mean, it's confusing to fans because they don't realize that it's the tires and the motors, you know, that are the big difference between the two divisions.
So I got a little spin on this, and it's probably not going to be popular, but that's okay. I'm not afraid to ruffle a few feathers. If I were a late model guy, if I were a WISSOTA late model guy, I would welcome that. I'd be like, you know what? If it's a 3-year phase-in where we can use our stuff up or whatever, pick an amount of time that makes sense for everybody, or over the phase-in, you got to take the current engine program and they got to limit it, put restrictors on it or whatever, right? I would like to see it transition to a crate. And here's why. I like the idea, okay, and I'm not saying everybody travels, but I like the idea that if I have a car that I can race all over the country, that appeals to me, right? You look at this 26,000 win. Bert, there is numerous opportunities throughout the whole season and during the winter where they can race for 10, 15, 20,000 win in a crate late model division. There is zero opportunity to take a WISSOTA late model anywhere else other than your WISSOTA tracks to race for any significant money. Even with the Tri-State Series, I think their biggest paying show is like $2,500, right? It's not that big of a deal. The Dirt Kings, I think they got a $5,000 to win deal down at Mississippi Thunder. I think is their biggest payday. They might have another one over in Eastern Wisconsin. Now, I like it going like, look, okay, the season's over up here. There's no more late model racing, but look, hey, we can go on a family vacation down to Tennessee, race for $10,000 to win. We can go over here, race for $15,000 to win. If they transition to crate late models, all of a sudden you have the WISSOTA 100, $10,000 to win. Pretty soon you're pulling in crate cars from other parts of the country, right? That stuff appeals to me of more opportunity, right? It's way more opportunity, and people are like, well, that hurts the engine builders. Well, a lot of them late model guys aren't ordering their engines locally anyway. There's a lot of them guys that are buying their late model engines from way out in the area. Yeah, there's some in the area, but there's still all the other classes. I like the opportunity that presents, kind of like the IMCA deal. John Lackman, we call him Mod Chaser, he posted, I believe there was in the top 10 at that IMCA stock car feature, there was 9 different states represented. 9.
Yeah.
And I just want to point it out, Minnesota had 2 in the top 10. I'm just saying Minnesota represented. They didn't win, but Wisconsin won, so he still won. But that appeals to me, right? You start looking at these invitationals, these big specials, that would open the door. And quite frankly, you know, the crate engines are cheaper. I don't know how much, you know, because you're still going to get them fresh and you're still going to do your thing. But the part that appeals to me is when you see a 26,000 win race down south, you're like, well, I can't bring my WISSOTA car anywhere, but I could go down there if I had a crate car. I don't know. I kind of like that idea myself. Now, I don't like the idea of having crate late models and late models on the same night. That makes no sense. It's kind of like B mods and A mods, one or the other. But I think the racing would be just as good as it is now. In fact, most tracks, I don't think it would make a difference. You get Superior as slippery as it was, some guys probably be faster with a crate. Some guys probably be better, you know, so that's something to think about right there, you know, opening up the horizons to where our drivers, if they have cars, they can travel all over the place.
Well, the only way that would work is everybody has to buy into it.
Exactly. Exactly. So, Bert, you have the agenda in front of us, in front of you.
Yes.
So you're going to have to lead the way because my phone has kind of died and I did not plug it in. So,
Well,
I know next on the agenda on the late models, I do know this. A little bit of late model news for you and Puka because you're late model guys. So, two of the top guys in the Wasota Superstock division, Kevin Burdick, who got second and won the national championship a couple years back, Dave Flynn, they sold their super stocks. It sounds like they're making the transition to fat tire cars in 2022. So that's pretty exciting.
yeah, and somebody else made their first laps at Cedar Lake.
They did. They did. The Hermantown Hammers kid, Cade Nelson. So I was surprised to not see Daryl Nelson at the Can-Am Clash because Superior Speedway is his home track. But he was down there. I believe they were maybe down there for some, I don't know if go-kart racing was happening, but they were doing some two-seater stuff. And, of course, Cade Nelson, who is a third-generation racer who's running the go-karts now, Daryl's kid, he made some laps at the Cedar Lake Speedway. Sounds like he turned some pretty good ones. The future's bright. There's your third-generation star right there. That kid's gonna turn some heads. No different than Buzzy Adams' kid. He's gonna be transitioning into the big cars here in just a little bit too.
Yep. And earlier in the show, we talked about how Superior and some of those tracks in the north, they need the border open so the Canadians can cross. But the Canadians are racing. They don't need to come to the States to see racing.
They do. So up in Thunder Bay, the vision, right? They got a brand new track up there, the Dairy Queen International Speedway. Of course, the founder of that track, he passed away not too long ago, maybe a month or two ago, and that track has now gone. They have a board in a driver by the name of Rick Simpson. He used to race. I raced against him. He's a general manager up there, up in Thunder Bay. So it's going to be pretty interesting. They're going to race Wednesday nights, no different than Riverview Raceway did back in the day. They're going to run on Wednesdays during the season. And old late model guy up there, Bert, I don't think you saw the news. I think you see it on the agenda. But Joel Kreiderman, who is a legend, is going to be back in action. Sounds like he's going to run Wasota Modified full-time in 2022. So welcome back, the Northern gentleman, Joel Kreiderman. I'm excited to see that.
Yeah, I'll be excited to see him back in a race car, even though it's not a late model.
Right?
But yeah, I mean, the season's winding down and we have one final race left this year.
Yeah, over at Ogilvie, they got the Topless Nationals. Of course, national points is done. So this is a non-points race. And if you look at Ogilvie's website, they kind of opened it up to like any different sanction. You run your own rules type of deal. No roof, no sail panels on it. So it's the topless event over at Ogilvie. No late models. Sorry, Bert, they're not having late models. Everything else at this one. But like I said, my lock of the week, Shane Zabrowski is going to get a pair of wins this weekend.
All right, and that leads us to our must-see events, and I'll let you lead us off, bring us into that.
Yeah, so the first one I'm looking forward to is the Castro Full Night in America over at Bulls Gap. That race is going to be good. Over at Volunteer Speedway, it's a bull ring down there. That's a high flying track. Sounds like they got a pretty good field of cars. That's tonight, and man, you're gonna have to give me a couple. Give me a nugget there because I don't have my notes. I don't have them in front of me because my phone died.
Oh, well, you had number one, the Woo Sprints at Lakeside.
Yes, yep.
And then
how can you not be a fan of the World of Outlaw Sprints, right? And they had a weekend off, and they only got it's kind of a weird deal. Bert, how weird is that they have a standalone show, just a one regular $10,000 to win show on the weekend? Well, to me, that's like poor scheduling, right? They travel enough. You'd think that they put a couple shows back to back, but it is what it is. But I'm looking forward to that one for sure.
Yeah, they have that show on Friday, and then they don't race again until the following Friday.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. What else do I got on there?
And then you have Why Not Motorsports Park, Meridian, Mississippi, 50,000.
Yeah, Dennis Erb Jr. won that race last year. I think he held off Turbo to get it done. So down at Meridian, Mississippi, Why Not Speedway, the guy that I raced against him in a modified, the owner I think he's a promoter or the owner of that track. and I don't have his name in front of me, but I raced against him down in East Bay. Rodney Wing, that's what it is. So Rodney Wing, the general manager down there at Why Not, and pretty good racing down there. And with so little late model racing going on this weekend, can we expect to see a pretty decent car count at that one, or do you think some people are just going to take the weekend off and get ready for Charlotte? What do you think?
I mean, I think some drivers will just take the weekend off, but depending how far away their shop is or they live from the track, like, I mean, I would expect you'd see Cade Dillard there, and some of the drivers that live closer in that area.
Yeah, and that's on Flow, so you'll be able to watch that. Heats Friday, features Saturday. What is that one? 20? Is it 25 or 20?
15.
15.
Yeah.
So hopefully we get Overton to a couple of these races, right? Because we want to see him get. I'd love to see him get to 1 million. I think that'd be a great story. So with that said, Bert, what races are you looking forward to this weekend?
Pretty much the same as yours, just kind of in a different order. I have the Castro Flow Racing first, and then the sprints, and then Why Not third.
Okay.
There's not a lot to choose from, so our list is pretty close.
I'm pretty interested in that crate deal. I really am, because I honestly expect down at Alltech, I think they're going to be 80, 90 crate late models down there. They're going to have a pretty good field of cars, and when you look at some of the drivers that are going to be in that one, I didn't even have it on the list. Jimmy Owen's going to be there, right? You're going to have Kyle Bronson. Of course, you're going to have the Magic Man, Mark Leitner. You'll have him down there. So you're going to have some really talented drivers, and plus there's a lot of regional guys that are good in that crate stuff down there. That race will probably be pretty good as well. So I'm assuming you're not going to any races. It'll all be online here this weekend for you.
Correct. I'm probably done going to races for the year. So yeah, everything's going to be online for me.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. So no more racing this year for me in person. Well, I shouldn't say that. Maybe we'll get down to Gateway. We'll see as we get a little bit closer to that. That's always a possibility. But episode 102 in the books, and fans, like we talked about, put your comments in the section. In the section below. Give us your comments. Give us your thoughts. That deal with the national championship, of course, in the modifieds, a little bit controversial, but, not to take anything away from TPO. If you have a 102 or a number 2 that comes to mind, put that in the comments below. Give us your thoughts on the late model deal, right? Look at it from all different perspectives. Would late models transitioning to crates be better overall for the sport, right? Think about that. So with that said, episode 102 in the books, and we'll be back at her next week. Puka, of course, off this weekend here. We're gonna have to pick on him a little bit for hanging us out to dry, but we still love him. But enjoy the show. Glad we got to sit and visit racing a little bit. We'll be back at you next week.